Millionaire CEO found little girl cleaning the office every night. What he learned left him paralyzed. Have you ever walked into a room expecting emptiness, only to find your entire world about to change? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Alexander Whitmore thought he knew exactly what awaited him on the 47th floor of his billion-dollar empire that Thursday night. What he discovered would challenge everything he believed about success, family, and the meaning of true wealth. The elevator's soft hum carried Alexander toward what should have been his deserted executive suite. At 38, he had built Whitmore Industries from nothing, a testament to ruthless ambition and calculated risks. Tonight felt different, though. He couldn't explain why. It was nearly midnight. The building should have been empty except for security. Yet as those familiar doors slid open, the faint sound of movement drifted from his corner office. His first thought, corporate espionage. His second, someone was about to face the full force of his legal team. Moving silently down the marble corridor, Alexander's Italian leather shoes barely whispered against the polished floor. The cleaning crew wasn't scheduled until weekend. His assistant had confirmed every employee's departure hours ago. So who dared invade his sanctuary? Rounding the corner toward his office, Alexander froze completely. There, kneeling beside his massive oak desk, was a child. She couldn't have been older than 10, wearing a faded blue shirt that swallowed her tiny frame and yellow cleaning gloves that made her hands look impossibly small. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she worked with the focused determination of someone carrying the weight of survival on her shoulders. "Excuse me," Alexander eyed softly, fighting the urge to speak louder. The little girl looked up, her large brown eyes widening with surprise but not fear. She stood slowly, clutching the cleaning cloth against her chest like armor. "I'm sorry, sir. I know I'm not supposed to be here this late, but I promise I'll finish soon," she said, her voice steady despite obvious nervousness. Alexander stepped closer, his business instincts temporarily overwhelmed by genuine concern. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Luna," she replied, lifting her chin with startling boldness. "Luna Martinez." "Luna, what are you doing here so late? Where are your parents?" The question hit her like a physical blow, but she recovered with remarkable speed, that same determined expression returning to her young face. "I have no one to help me, so I have to help myself by working hard," she said, her words carrying weight no child should bear. "My mom died in a car accident 3 years after I was born, and I'm alone. I have no one to care for me." Alexander felt his heart clench painfully. "Surely you have family, grandparents, an aunt or uncle." Luna shook her head firmly. "My mom's parents died before I was born, and my dad—" She paused, looking down at her gloved hands. "I never knew him. Mom said he left when he found out she was pregnant." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications Alexander was only beginning to understand. Can you imagine discovering that while you've been building an empire, a child has been fighting for survival just floors below your feet? What happens next would leave even the most hardened hearts questioning everything they thought they knew about strength, courage, and what it truly means to have nothing left to lose. What do you do when you meet someone who refuses to be a victim of their circumstances? Alexander Whitmore was about to discover that some of life's most profound lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. "Then who's been taking care of you? You're just a child," Alexander pressed gently. "I take care of myself," Luna said with fierce pride that would make grown adults ashamed of their own complaints. "I've been living in the old building next to the park. Mrs. Chen, she's the night security guard downstairs. She lets me clean the offices after everyone goes home. She pays me $20 a night and I save every penny." $20. Alexander spent more than that on a single cup of coffee some mornings. Yet for this child, it represented survival, dignity, and hope rolled into crumpled bills. "Luna, you should be in school, not working," he said, though even as the words left his mouth, he realized how naive they sounded. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back with stubborn determination. "I want to go to school more than anything in the world, sir. But I can't afford it, and I have to work to eat and have a place to sleep. The shelter downtown is full, and the other places—" She shuddered slightly. "They're not safe for someone like me." Alexander sank into one of his leather chairs, studying this remarkable child who spoke with wisdom born from necessity rather than textbooks. "How long have you been doing this, Luna?" "About 6 months now. Mrs. Chen found me sleeping in the alley behind the building during a rainstorm. She said I reminded her of her granddaughter back in China. Luna's expression softened slightly. She's been very kind to me, but she doesn't make much money either. She shares her dinner with me sometimes. Here was a child who had been surviving independently, maintaining her dignity while working rather than begging. Something about her spirit reminded Alexander of his own younger self, though his circumstances had been vastly different. Luna, I want to help you, but first I need to understand something. How have you been avoiding social services? Don't you have to be enrolled in school? Luna's expression grew guarded. I'm very careful, sir. I change where I sleep every few nights, and I know how to stay invisible during the day. I go to the public library and read books. I've taught myself math and reading that way. The librarians think I'm homeschooled. Alexander was stunned. You taught yourself to read? Yes, sir. My mom taught me the alphabet before she died, and I remembered her voice reading to me. I started with picture books and worked my way up. Now I can read at a high school level. Standing up, Alexander walked to the window overlooking the city lights. Below, millions of people went about their lives, most unaware that children like Luna were fighting extraordinary battles just to see another sunrise. Luna, what you've accomplished is remarkable, but you're still just a child, and you deserve so much more than this. I don't want charity, sir, Luna said quickly, her voice sharp with pride. Alexander turned back to her, recognizing something in her eyes that he knew intimately. Pride, determination, and fierce independence that couldn't be broken by circumstances. Have you ever met someone whose strength makes you question your own definition of courage? What Alexander proposed next would either change both their lives forever or destroy the fragile trust building between a desperate child and a powerful man who was beginning to understand that true wealth had nothing to do with bank accounts. Can 3 weeks really transform a life? Sometimes the most profound changes happen not over years, but in the space between one heartbeat and the next, when hope finally has room to breathe.
The next morning, Alexander couldn't concentrate on quarterly reports. Images of Luna, her small hands gripping those oversized cleaning gloves, the way she held her head high despite impossible circumstances, kept intruding on his thoughts. He had sent her home that night with a promise to return the following evening, but home for Luna was wherever she could find safety, and that knowledge aided him.
Victoria, could you come in here, please? Alexander pressed his intercom.
Victoria Reeves, his assistant of 8 years, entered with her usual efficiency. At 52, she had been with the company since its early days and was one of the few people Alexander trusted completely. I need you to research emergency foster care and guardianship applications in the state. Also, look into the best private schools in the area, ones with strong scholarship programs and flexible enrollment policies. Victoria raised an eyebrow but made notes without question. Is this related to a new charitable initiative? In a way, Alexander replied, then decided she deserved more explanation. I encountered a situation last night that requires immediate attention. A child who's been living on her own, working to survive. I want to help her properly, legally, and in a way that ensures her long-term welfare. That evening, Luna appeared in his doorway, wearing the same blue shirt, though she had managed to find jeans that fit better. Alexander gestured to the chair across from his desk. Hear me out. I have a proposal for you, but I want you to hear me out completely before you respond. Luna nodded solemnly, perching on the edge of the chair with alert caution. I want to arrange for you to have a safe place to live, a small apartment near a good school. I'll cover all your educational expenses, including tutoring. If you still want to work, and I respect that you do, I can arrange for you to have a part-time job here at the company, something age-appropriate that you can do after school and weekends. Luna's eyes grew wide, but she remained silent. In exchange, I would ask that you focus on your education and allow me to be a mentor, someone who helps guide your decisions and ensures you're safe. Luna asked quietly. I still don't understand why you would do this for someone you just met. Alexander leaned back, considering how to explain something he wasn't entirely sure he understood himself. Luna, in my line of work, I meet many people. Most want something from me: money, connections, opportunities. Last night, I met someone who wasn't asking for anything, someone who, despite impossible circumstances, was working hard and maintaining dignity. That's rare. And when you encounter something rare and valuable, you don't let it slip away. Luna was quiet for a long moment. What would happen if I said yes? Would I have to call you dad or something? The question caught Alexander off guard. No, Luna. I'm not trying to replace your mother or pretend to be something I'm not. I'm offering to be someone who cares about your future and wants to help you achieve your potential. Do you know what it feels like when hope and fear collide in a single moment? Luna was about to make a decision that would either save her life or leave her more vulnerable than ever. What she said next would determine whether this was the beginning of something beautiful or just another disappointment in a young life that had already seen too many. Have you ever walked into a room where everyone seems to speak a language you don't understand, even though they're using the same words you know? Luna was about to discover that privilege has its own dialect and survival skills don't always translate to social success. 3 weeks later, St. Catherine's Academy buzzed with the energy of a new school year. Students in crisp uniforms hurried across the manicured campus, backpacks slung over shoulders, chattering excitedly about summer vacations and new classes. Luna stood at the edge of the courtyard, wearing her new navy blazer and plaid skirt, her long brown hair neatly braided. She had insisted on walking to school alone, a small assertion of independence that Alexander had respected, though he had watched from his car until she safely entered the building. You must be Luna Martinez, said a warm voice behind her. Luna turned to see a tall woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. I'm Mrs. Patterson, the guidance counselor. Mr. Whitmore spoke very highly of you. Luna felt familiar anxiety spike. How much had Alexander told the school about her background? Reading her thoughts, Mrs. Patterson continued. He mentioned that you're an exceptional student who's been homeschooled and is now ready for a more traditional academic environment. I'm here to help you navigate your first day. Luna relaxed slightly. Alexander had kept his promise about maintaining her privacy. The morning classes went smoothly. Luna's academic preparation had been thorough, and she found herself keeping up easily with coursework. It was the social aspects that proved more challenging. At lunch, she sat at a corner table, opening the brown bag she had packed that morning. She was used to eating alone and found the cafeteria's noise and energy overwhelming. Is anyone sitting here? Asked a voice. Luna looked up to see a girl about her own age, with curly red hair and freckles scattered across her nose. No, Luna replied quietly. Great. I'm Sophia Wells. You're the new girl, right? Luna. Sophia unpacked what looked like a gourmet lunch, complete with cloth napkin. Luna nodded, unsure how to navigate this social situation. Where did you transfer from? Sophia asked casually. I was homeschooled, Luna replied carefully. Ooh, cool. My cousin was homeschooled until high school. She said it was awesome because she could learn at her own pace. Sophia took a bite of her sandwich. What does your family do? This was the question Luna had been dreading. I live with my guardian, she said simply. Bell's different. Is he nice? Luna thought about Alexander's patience, his genuine concern for her welfare, the way he had never made her feel like a charity case despite everything he had done for her. Yes, she said with more conviction than she had expected. He's very nice. What's his job? Owns a company. What kind of company? Before Luna could answer, the lunch period ended and students began clearing their tables. Luna felt relief wash over her. She wasn't ready for these kinds of conversations yet. Walking to her next class, Luna realized she was living in two worlds now, one where she belonged to a community of privilege and opportunity, and another where she remembered what it felt like to be invisible and desperate. The question was, could she bridge those worlds without losing herself in the process? How do you explain a past that most people couldn't imagine surviving? Luna was learning that sometimes the hardest part of being rescued isn't adjusting to safety. It's learning to trust that it will last. Sometimes the most dangerous threats come not from enemies you can see, but from whispered conversations in hallways, where your entire future can be decided by people who view you as nothing more than a problem to be solved. 2 months into the school year, Luna had settled into a routine that felt almost too good to be true. Her grades were exceptional, placing her at the top of her class in mathematics and science. She had made a few friends, including Sophia, who had a kind heart and didn't pry too much into Luna's background. Alexander had been true to his word about the part-time work arrangement. Every Saturday morning, Luna went to Whitmore Industries, where she helped organize files and assisted with simple data entry tasks. It wasn't the same as her nighttime cleaning, but it satisfied her need to earn money and maintain some independence. On this particular Saturday, Luna was working in the filing room when she overheard a conversation in the hallway outside that made her blood run cold. "I'm telling you, David, it looks suspicious," said a voice Luna didn't recognize. A single, wealthy man suddenly becomes guardian to a young girl? The media would have a field day if they got wind of this. Luna's hands froze on the files she was organizing. "Richard, you're being paranoid," replied David Chen, the company's legal counsel, whom Luna had met several times. "Alexander's motivations are entirely above board. I've handled all the paperwork myself, but think about the optics. We're trying to close the Morrison deal next month. If any negative publicity surfaces about the CEO's personal life," Luna felt her stomach drop. She hadn't considered that her presence in Alexander's life might cause problems for him professionally. "There's nothing negative to surface," David said firmly. "Alexander is helping a child who needed help. It's commendable, not scandalous." Maybe so, but perception is reality in business. I'm just saying we should be prepared for questions. Luna heard footsteps moving away, and she sat frozen in her chair. The last thing she wanted was to cause problems for Alexander, especially after everything he had done for her. That evening, Luna sat in her apartment, trying to focus on homework, but unable to stop thinking about the conversation she had overheard. When Alexander arrived for their weekly dinner, a tradition they had established, she was unusually quiet. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing her mood immediately. Luna put down her fork and looked across the small dining table at him. "Mr. Whitmore, am I causing problems for you at work?" Alexander's expression grew serious. "What makes you ask that?" Luna told him about the conversation she had overheard, watching his face carefully as she spoke. "I see," he said when she finished. "And what do you think about what they said?" "I think maybe I should go away for a while, just until your business deal is finished. I don't want to cause you any trouble." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge to everything they had built together. "Have you ever been willing to sacrifice your own happiness to protect someone you care about?" Luna was about to learn that sometimes the greatest act of love is being willing to walk away, but she was also about to discover that some people will fight for you even when you're ready to give up on yourself. What Alexander said next would either strengthen their bond forever or confirm Luna's worst fear, that she was nothing more than a burden that successful people eventually discard when convenience demands it. The small dining table felt like a courtroom as Luna waited for Alexander's response. Her confession about the overheard conversation hung between them like a loaded weapon. She had expected anger, disappointment, maybe even relief that she was offering to disappear. What she hadn't expected was the quiet intensity that now filled his eyes. Alexander set down his fork with deliberate precision. The gesture was calm, controlled, but Luna recognized the steel beneath the surface. She had seen this same expression once before, the night they first met, when he had made his initial offer to help her. "Luna, do you remember telling me about the shelter downtown? How it was full and the other places weren't safe?" She nodded, confused by the direction of his question. "You made a choice then? You chose the streets over safety because you understood that sometimes the appearance of help can be more dangerous than honest struggle?" Luna watched his face carefully, trying to read where this was leading. Richard Morrison and his concerns about optics represent everything I've spent my career fighting against. They represent the kind of thinking that values appearance over substance, profit over principle. Alexander stood and walked to the small window overlooking the street. Below, evening commuters hurried past, each absorbed in their own concerns, unaware that a child's future was being decided in the apartment above. I built Whitmore Industries on a simple principle: do the right thing, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. He turned back to face her, and Luna saw something in his expression that made her chest tighten with emotion. You are not a liability to be managed or a problem to be hidden. You're a remarkable young woman who deserves every opportunity in the world. And if Richard Morrison can't see that, then he's exactly the kind of person I don't want to do business with. Luna felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back. But what if it costs you millions? What if other people think the same way? Alexander returned to his seat, leaning forward with the intensity of someone sharing a fundamental truth. Then they're not the kind of people whose respect I want. Luna, success without integrity is just expensive failure. And I'd rather lose every business deal in the world than compromise on what I know is right. The conviction in his voice was absolute, unshakable. Luna had learned to recognize truth in people's voices. Her survival had depended on it, and she heard no doubt, no hidden reservations. Are you absolutely certain? She asked quietly. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Luna nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside her chest. For the first time since her mother's death, she truly understood what it meant to have someone choose her welfare over their own interests. Alexander reached across the table and squeezed her hand gently. Besides, I have a feeling that Richard Morrison's concerns about optics might be motivated by more than just business prudence. What do you mean? I mean that sometimes the people who are quickest to point fingers are the ones with the most to hide. 3 days later, Alexandra was reviewing quarterly projections when Victoria appeared in his doorway with an expression he had never seen before. Her usual professional composure had cracked, revealing genuine alarm. Sir, there's a woman here from Child Services. She says it's urgent. Alexander felt his blood turn cold. The timing was too convenient, too calculated. He had been expecting something like this ever since the conversation with Morrison's associates, but the reality still hit him like a physical blow. Send her in. Margaret Foster entered with the bearing of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. Her gray suit was impeccable, her briefcase expensive, her expression carefully neutral. But Alexander caught something in her eyes, a flicker of discomfort that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with her mission. Mr. Whitmore, I'm Margaret Foster from the Department of Children and Family Services. We need to discuss Luna Martinez. Alexander gestured to a chair, his mind already racing through legal implications and protective strategies. How can I help you? Margaret opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency, retrieving a folder that seemed far too thick for a routine inquiry. We received an anonymous report yesterday alleging that your guardianship of Luna Martinez may not be appropriate. The word hung in the air like poison. Alexander felt his hands clench involuntarily, but kept his voice level. I'm not sure what you're implying, Miss Foster, but my interest in Luna's welfare is entirely proper. The caller suggested otherwise. They claimed that a single wealthy man developing such a close relationship with a homeless child raises questions about motivation. Alexander stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The accusation was so vile, so deliberately constructed to destroy everything they had built, that he struggled to maintain his composure. My Foster, I found Luna working in this building at midnight, alone and vulnerable. I offered her safety, education, and stability. Are you suggesting that helping a child in need is somehow suspicious? Margaret's expression softened slightly. Mr. Whitmore, I'm not making accusations. But when anonymous reports are filed, we're required to investigate. The caller provided specific details about your relationship with Luna that require official review. What kind of details? Margaret consulted her file. They claimed that you sought out a vulnerable child specifically, that you've isolated her from other adults, and that your interest in her goes beyond normal mentorship. Each word felt like a dagger. Alexander realized that whoever had made this report understood exactly how to weaponize the child protection system against them. These allegations are completely false. Luna can tell you herself. Actually, that's why I'm here. I need to interview Luna immediately, and given the nature of the accusations, you cannot be present during that conversation. Alexander felt the ground shifting beneath him. You're going to traumatize a child who's already been through enough based on an anonymous phone call? I'm going to ensure that child's safety, which is my job. Margaret's voice carried the weight of institutional authority. Mr. Whitmore, I understand this is difficult, but if these allegations are unfounded, the investigation will prove that. And in the meantime, Margaret closed her file with finality. In the meantime, Luna will be placed in emergency foster care until the investigation is complete. The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. Luna, who had fought so hard to build a stable life, who was finally thriving in school and developing friendships, would be ripped away from everything she had gained. How long will this investigation take? Several weeks, possibly longer. These matters can't be rushed. Alexander turned back to the window, looking down at the city where Luna was probably sitting in a classroom, working through advanced mathematics, believing that her future was secure. Lester, can I ask you something? In your professional opinion, does this feel like a legitimate concern, or does it feel like someone trying to manipulate the system? Margaret hesitated for the first time since entering his office. Mr. Whitmore, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've learned to recognize genuine concerns versus malicious reports. But regardless of my personal impressions, I have to follow protocol. And protocol requires destroying a child's stability based on unsubstantiated accusations. Protocol requires protecting children from potential harm, even when that protection feels harsh. Alexander nodded slowly, recognizing the impossible position Margaret was in, but understanding her constraints didn't make the injustice any less bitter. When do you plan to speak with Luna? This afternoon. I wanted to give you the courtesy of advance notice. After Margaret left, Alexander sat alone in his office, staring at the city skyline and feeling more helpless than he had since his early days as a struggling entrepreneur. Someone had declared war on his relationship with Luna, and they had chosen their weapon perfectly. He pressed his intercom. Victoria, get David Chen up here immediately and cancel everything for the rest of the day. Luna sat in the guidance counselor's office, her school uniform neat and her posture straight, but her mind racing with possibilities. Mrs. Patterson had explained that someone from Child Services needed to speak with her, but the explanation had been vague, careful. Margaret Foster sat across from her with an official folder and an expression that tried to be reassuring but failed to hide the gravity of the situation. Luna, I'm Miss Foster from Child Services. I need to ask you some questions about your living situation with Mr. Whitmore. Luna's stomach dropped. She had learned to read adult expressions during her months on the street, and she recognized the look of someone preparing to deliver devastating news. Is Mr. Whitmore in trouble? She asked directly. Margaret exchanged a glance with Mrs. Patterson. We received a report about your relationship with him. I need to understand how he treats you. Muna felt the familiar sensation of the world tilting beneath her feet. Someone had reported Alexander. Someone had deliberately tried to destroy the first stable relationship she had ever known. Goes back to the author who made the report. I can't share that information, but I need you to be completely honest with me about your experiences with Mr. Whitmore. Luna straightened in her chair, drawing on the same inner strength that had kept her alive during her darkest months. Mr. Whitmore found me cleaning offices at midnight because I had no other choice. I was hungry, homeless, and completely alone. He could have called the police or ignored me entirely. Instead, he listened to my story and offered to help. And how has he helped you? Me a safe apartment where I can study without fear. He enrolled me in the best school I've ever attended. He makes sure I have everything I need, but he's never made me feel like I owe him anything except to work hard and make good choices. Margaret made notes in her file. Has Mr. Whitmore ever made you uncomfortable? Ever asked you to do anything that seemed Inappropriate? Luna's eyes flashed with sudden understanding and controlled fury. Are you asking if he's hurt me? Margaret nodded gently. Never. Luna's voice carried absolute conviction. Mr. Whitmore has never done anything inappropriate. He treats me with respect and kindness. He talks to me like my opinions matter. He's never even raised his voice to me. Luna, sometimes adults can convince children that inappropriate behavior is normal. Stop. Luna stood up, her young frame trembling with indignation. I lived on the streets for 6 months. I learned the difference between people who want to help and people who want to hurt. I had to learn that difference to survive. She faced Margaret with the fierce dignity that had carried her through her worst days. Mr. Whitmore didn't seek me out. I wasn't some vulnerable child he targeted. I was working in his building because I needed money to eat. He discovered me by accident. And instead of treating me like a problem to be solved, he treated me like a person who deserved a chance. Mrs. Patterson spoke up quietly. Miss Foster, Luna has been exceptional here at St. Catherine's. Her grades are outstanding, she's well-adjusted socially, and she shows no signs of trauma or distress. I understand that she appears to be thriving. I don't just appear to be thriving, Luna interrupted. I am thriving. For the first time in my life, I have stability, education, and someone who believes in my potential. If you take me away from Mr. Whitmore, you're not protecting me. You're punishing both of us for doing nothing wrong. Margaret studied Luna's face carefully. In 15 years of interviewing children, she had developed an instinct for distinguishing truth from coached responses. What she saw in Luna's eyes was absolute certainty and mature understanding of her own situation. Nevertheless, there are protocols I have to follow. Luna, you'll need to stay with a foster family while we complete our investigation. Luna felt the familiar, cold emptiness that had accompanied every major loss in her young life. But this time, instead of despair, she felt determination. How long? Several weeks, possibly longer. Luna closed her eyes briefly, gathering her strength. When she opened them, her expression was calm and resolute. Mr. Whitmore, I want you to understand something. Whatever happens, wherever you place me, I will not lie about Mr. Whitmore. He's a good man who helped a child in need. Whoever told you otherwise is either confused or deliberately trying to hurt us both. Margaret felt a chill at the maturity in Luna's voice. This wasn't a coached child or a victim in denial. This was a young woman who had survived impossible circumstances and was now fighting to protect the relationship that had saved her. Let's gather your things from your locker, Luna. As they walked through the hallway, Luna's mind was already working. The timing of this investigation was too convenient. Someone had waited until she and Alexander had grown close, until the guardianship was nearly finalized, and then struck with surgical precision. Someone wanted to destroy their relationship, and Luna intended to find out who. The Henderson house sat on a quiet suburban street lined with mature oak trees and well-maintained lawns. It was the kind of neighborhood where children rode bicycles and families gathered for barbecues. A world Luna had observed from the outside, but never expected to enter. Janet Henderson met them at the front door with a warm smile and the tired eyes of someone who had seen too many children arrive with suitcases full of trauma. You must be Luna. We're so glad to have you with us. It was a dull, alert, almost. Luna managed a polite response, but her mind was elsewhere. She was calculating distances to the library, to Alexander's office, to St. Catherine's Academy. She was planning how to maintain contact with the life she was being forced to abandon. We've prepared the room upstairs you'll be sharing with Mia. She's been with us for about 6 months. Mia Turner was 14, with hollow cheeks and suspicious eyes that reminded Luna of her own reflection during her darkest days. She looked up from a tattered paperback novel when Luna entered the small bedroom. Fresh meat, Mia said without humor. What's your damage? Luna set her single suitcase on the narrow bed that had been designated as hers. Someone made false accusations about my guardian. Guardian? Not parents? No parents. Just me and the man who saved my life. Mia studied Luna's expensive school uniform and well-groomed appearance. Saved your life how? Luna considered how much to share. In foster care, information was currency, and vulnerability was dangerous. I was homeless. He gave me a chance at a normal life. And now Child Services thinks he's a pervert? The crude summary made Luna flinch, but she nodded. Classic, Mia said bitterly. They destroy the good placements and leave us with the disasters. I've had 3 families in 2 years. The Hendersons are decent, but they're not permanent. Nobody's permanent. That night, Luna lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to Mia's restless movements and the distant sound of the Hendersons' television. The room smelled of industrial detergent and other people's lives. She thought about her apartment, her real home, with its morning sunlight and the desk where she completed her advanced mathematics assignments. She thought about Alexander's weekly dinners, their conversations about current events and future possibilities. Most importantly, she thought about the person who had made the anonymous call to Child Services. The accusation had been too specific, too calculated to be random. Someone had studied their relationship and identified exactly how to weaponize the system against them. Luna had always been analytical. It was part of what had kept her alive on the streets. And her analysis told her that this attack was personal, strategic, and connected to something larger than simple concern for her welfare. She slipped out of bed quietly, retrieving the small notebook she kept in her backpack. By the dim light of her phone, she began making lists. People who knew about her relationship with Alexander, people who might benefit from their separation, people who had expressed concerns or asked too many questions. One name kept surfacing in her analysis. Alexander had mentioned Morrison's company several times in recent weeks, always in the context of a major business deal. Luna remembered the overheard conversation about optics and negative publicity. She remembered Alexander's comment about people who point fingers having the most to hide. In the morning, she would find a way to research Morrison Technologies. She would use the public library computers the same way she had taught herself advanced mathematics and science. She would investigate the man who might have destroyed her life to protect his business. Interests. Mia's voice came from the other bed, quiet in the darkness. Hey, new girl, word of advice. Don't get too attached to anything here. Foster care teaches you one thing above all else. Nothing lasts. Luna stared at the ceiling, thinking about Alexander's promise that she could leave if she ever wanted to, about his commitment to her education and future. Maybe, she whispered back, but some things are worth fighting for. Alexander sat across from Richard Morrison in the executive dining room of the Meridian Hotel, struggling to maintain professional composure while every instinct screamed that he was looking at his enemy. Morrison was a man in his early 60s, with silver hair and the practiced charm of someone who had spent decades in corporate boardrooms. His suit was impeccable, his manner confident, but Alexander caught micro-expressions that betrayed deeper concerns. You understand my position, Alexander, Morrison was saying, cutting his steak with precise movements. My board is naturally concerned about the complications in your personal life. Alexander set down his fork, no longer pretending to have an appetite. Complication? The investigation by Child Services? The questions about your relationship with that young girl? Morrison's tone suggested he was discussing a minor inconvenience rather than a child's welfare. Her name is Luna, and there are no legitimate questions about our relationship. Morrison waved dismissively. Perhaps not, but perception is reality in our business. My investors don't like uncertainty, especially when it involves... He paused delicately. Sensitive allegations. Alexander studied Morrison's face carefully, looking for tells he had learned to recognize during years of high-stakes negotiations. Richard, can I ask you something directly? How did you learn about the Child Services investigation? Morrison's poker face slipped for just a fraction of a second, long enough for Alexander to catch a glimpse of guilty knowledge. It's a small industry, Alexander. Word travels. The investigation began 3 days ago. The only people who should know about it are Child Services, Luna, myself, and my attorney. Alexander leaned forward slightly. So, I'm curious how word traveled so quickly to your boardroom. Morrison's smile remained fixed, but his eyes had gone cold. Are you suggesting something? I'm trying to understand how you came to be so well informed about a confidential matter. Perhaps your security isn't as tight as you believe. Alexander felt pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. The timing of the anonymous report, Morrison's detailed knowledge of the situation, the calculated nature of the accusations, it all pointed to deliberate sabotage. Let me ask you another question, Richard. How desperate is Morrison Technologies right now? The question hit its target. Morrison's careful composure cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. I don't know what you're implying. I'm implying that you need this merger more than I do. Your company is hemorrhaging money, your stock prices dropped 40% in the last 6 months, and your creditors are starting to circle. Morrison's face flushed with anger. Even if that were true, it has nothing to do with your personal problems, doesn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you manufactured those personal problems to force me into a position where I'd have to choose between Luna and the merger. Alexander stood, his voice carrying the quiet intensity of absolute certainty. You made an anonymous call to Child Services. You fed them just enough detail to trigger an investigation, knowing it would create exactly the kind of negative publicity that would threaten our deal. Morrison also stood, his mask finally slipping completely. You can't prove that. Can't I? Because I'm betting that Child Services keeps records of their anonymous tips, phone numbers, call times, maybe even voice recordings. And I'm betting that a man desperate enough to destroy a child's life to save his failing company might have been careless enough to leave a trail. Morrison's eyes narrowed dangerously. Alexander, you're making a serious mistake. My company has resources you can't imagine. If you pursue this line of thinking, you'll find yourself dealing with problems that make a simple Child Services investigation look like a minor inconvenience. The threat was explicit now, the pretense of professional courtesy abandoned. Alexander smiled for the first time since entering the restaurant. Thank you, Richard. For what? For confirming exactly what kind of man you are, and for giving me all the motivation I need to destroy you completely. Alexander turned to leave, then paused at Morrison's shoulder. Oh, and Richard, that young girl you're using as a pawn in your corporate game, she's smarter, braver, and more ethical than you'll ever be. When this is over, she'll still have her integrity. You'll have nothing. As Alexander walked away, he was already planning his next moves. Morrison had declared war, but he had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated both Alexander's determination and Luna's remarkable strength. The battle for Luna's future was about to begin in earnest. The public library became Luna's war room. Every day after school, she slipped away from the Henderson house, claiming she needed quiet study time. What she really needed was answers. Seated at a corner computer terminal, Luna's fingers flew across the keyboard with the same determination that had once helped her survive on the streets. Morrison Technologies' public records painted a picture of desperation hidden behind corporate polish. Stock prices plummeting, quarterly losses mounting, investor confidence evaporating. But Luna dug deeper than financial reports. She searched news archives, court filings, business journals. A pattern emerged that made her stomach turn. 3 years ago, Morrison had attempted a hostile takeover of a smaller competitor. When that failed, the competitor's CEO found himself under investigation for embezzlement, charges that were later dropped, but not before the company collapsed. 2 years ago, a whistleblower at Morrison Technologies had tried to expose accounting irregularities. Within weeks, anonymous tips led to a child custody battle that destroyed the man's family life and forced his resignation. Morrison didn't just destroy businesses, he destroyed lives. Luna printed everything she could afford, hiding the documents in her school backpack. But she needed more than publicly available information. She needed proof of Morrison's direct involvement in her situation. That evening, she made a phone call she'd been dreading. "Mrs. Chen, it's Luna. I need your help." The older woman's voice warmed immediately. "Luna? Child, how are you? I've been so worried since you stopped coming to work." Luna explained the situation carefully, watching for any sign that Mrs. Chen doubted her story. Instead, she heard anger building in the security guard's voice. "That man hurt you and Mr. Whitmore for money? That's evil. I think I can prove it, but I need to get into the Morrison Technologies building. They're on the 32nd floor of the Meridian Tower." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Luna, that's dangerous. If you're caught—" "I've been caught before, Mrs. Chen. I survived foster care, homelessness, and people who wanted to hurt me. I can handle one corrupt businessman." "What do you need me to do?" Luna smiled for the first time in days. "I need you to get me a cleaning uniform and access to the building after hours. And I need you to teach me everything you know about corporate security systems." The next evening, Luna met Mrs. Chen in the parking garage of the Meridian Tower. The older woman handed her a uniform that had been altered to fit her small frame and a cleaning cart equipped with everything she would need. "The cameras on the 32nd floor have a blind spot near the elevator bank," Mrs. Chen explained. "The executive offices lock automatically at 7 p.m., but the cleaning crew master key opens everything except the personal safes." Luna nodded, absorbing every detail. "What about the night security guards, gaining rounds every 2 hours?" "You'll have plenty of time if you're smart about it." As Luna pushed the cleaning cart into the service elevator, Mrs. Chen caught her arm gently. "Be careful, child. Some secrets are dangerous to know." Luna met her eyes steadily. "Mrs. Chen, I've been dangerous my whole life. Tonight, Morrison's going to find out just how dangerous a desperate child can be." The 32nd floor of the Meridian Tower felt different at midnight than Luna had expected. Where Whitmore Industries buzzed with purposeful energy, even after hours, Morrison Technologies felt cold, almost hostile. The air itself seemed to carry the weight of desperation. Luna moved through the executive corridor with practiced silence, her small frame allowing her to stay low and avoid detection. Morrison's corner office was exactly what she'd expected. Oversized desk, expensive artwork, and a computer that hadn't been properly secured. Corporate executives, Luna had learned, were often careless with their digital security. They relied on building security and assumed their secrets were safe behind locked doors. They never considered that a 9-year-old with survival instincts might find a way inside. Morrison's email account was still logged in. Luna's heart raced as she scrolled through recent messages, looking for anything related to her case. What she found exceeded her worst fears. A message thread with someone named R. Palmer detailed the entire scheme. Palmer, apparently a private investigator, had been paid to manufacture evidence against Alexander. The anonymous tip to Child Services had been carefully crafted to create maximum damage with minimum proof required. But the most damaging email was from just 2 days ago. Phase 2 ready. If Whitmore doesn't cave on the merger terms, we move to criminal accusations. I have contacts in the DA's office who owe favors. Luna's hands trembled as she forwarded the emails to her own account. Morrison wasn't just trying to separate her from Alexander. He was planning to destroy Alexander completely. A sound in the hallway froze her blood. Footsteps. Heavy, purposeful, coming toward the office. Luna grabbed the cleaning supplies and dove under Morrison's massive desk just as the door opened. Through the small gap between the desk and floor, she could see expensive leather shoes and pressed trouser legs. "I told you this needed to be handled delicately." Morrison's voice filled the room. He was on his phone, pacing behind his desk. "If that kid keeps digging around asking questions, people are going to start connecting dots we don't want connected." Luna pressed herself flatter against the floor, hardly daring to breathe. "I don't care what it costs," Morrison continued. "Make sure she's placed somewhere far away. A facility upstate, maybe? Somewhere she can't cause any more trouble? And if Whitmore tries to fight it, We move to phase 3. The conversation continued for another agonizing 10 minutes before Morrison finally left. Luna waited another 20 minutes before emerging, her entire body shaking with rage and fear. Morrison wasn't just corrupt, he was planning to have her disappeared. As she gathered her evidence and prepared to leave, Luna made a decision that would have terrified any adult who knew her full story. She wasn't going to run or hide anymore. It was time to fight back. Alexander stared at the emails Luna had forwarded, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Sitting across from him in his office, Luna watched his face cycle through disbelief, fury, and something colder. Calculation. Threatened to have you disappeared, Alexander said quietly. A 9-year-old child. He's desperate, Luna replied with the same calm she'd shown that first night they met. Desperate people do terrible things. Alexander looked up from the computer screen. Luna, what you did was incredibly dangerous. If Morrison had caught you, but he didn't. And now we have proof. Luna's voice carried steel. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Before Alexander could answer, Victoria's voice came through the intercom. Sir, Richard Morrison is here. He says it's urgent. Alexander and Luna exchanged glances. Send him in, Alexander said. Morrison entered with the swagger of a man who believed he held all the cards. His confident smile faltered slightly when he saw Luna sitting calmly beside Alexander's desk. Alexander, I thought we should discuss the merger terms privately, Morrison said, his eyes never leaving Luna. Actually, Richard, I think Luna should hear this. After all, it concerns her directly. Morrison's composure cracked. I'm not sure what you mean. Alexander turned his computer monitor so Morrison could see the email thread displayed on screen. The color drained from the older man's face. Interesting reading, Alexander said conversationally, particularly the part about phase 3 and making sure Luna disappears somewhere she can't cause trouble. Morrison's mask slipped completely, revealing the cruel calculation underneath. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Whitmore. I've destroyed bigger men than you for less. Have you? Alexander stood slowly. Because from where I sit, you look like a failing businessman who's so desperate to save his company that he's willing to threaten a child. That child, Morrison pointed at Luna, his voice rising, is going to cost you everything. The media, your investors, your reputation. No, Luna interrupted, standing up. Despite her small stature, something in her presence commanded attention. You're going to cost him everything because you're a coward who hides behind anonymous phone calls and hired investigators. Morrison turned his full attention to Luna, his expression vicious. You little... Careful! Alexander's voice cut through the air like a blade. Very careful. But Luna stepped forward, unintimidated. You made one mistake, Mr. Morrison. You assumed I was helpless because I'm a child. But I survived on the streets when adults failed me. I learned to read people when my life depended on it. And I can recognize a predator from a mile away. Morrison's hands clenched into fists. You think you're so smart? You have no idea what real power looks like. One phone call from me, and you'll be in juvenile detention on fabricated charges. Another call, and your precious guardian will face criminal investigation that will destroy him. The threat hung in the air like poison. Luna felt the familiar sensation of standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one wrong step meant falling back into the darkness she'd fought so hard to escape. But this time, she wasn't alone. Make the calls, Alexander said quietly. Please, I'm begging you to make those calls. Morrison frowned, confusion replacing his rage. What? Alexander gestured to a small device on his desk, a digital recorder that had been running throughout the conversation. Because I've been hoping you'd admit to conspiracy, extortion, and threatening a minor on tape. My attorney is going to love this recording. Morrison's face went white as he realized the trap he'd walked into. Luna had provided the evidence, but Alexander had provided the opportunity for Morrison to destroy himself. "You set me up," Morrison whispered. Luna smiled for the first time in weeks. "No, Mr. Morrison, you set yourself up. We just gave you enough rope." The news broke on a Tuesday morning that would forever change how the business world viewed corporate ethics. Tech CEO exposes in child endangerment scheme dominated headlines across major publications. Morrison's carefully constructed reputation crumbled in hours. Luna sat in Alexander's office, watching news coverage on the wall-mounted television. Margaret Foster from Child Services had arrived an hour earlier with paperwork that officially closed the investigation and a rare apology from the department. "The allegations against Mr. Whitmore have been completely discredited," Foster explained, her professional demeanor softened by genuine remorse. "Luna, I want you to know that your testimony and the evidence you provided showed remarkable courage. Most adults wouldn't have handled this situation as well as you did." Luna nodded graciously, though Alexander could see the lingering hurt in her eyes. Being vindicated didn't erase the trauma of separation and suspicion. "What happens to Morrison now?" Luna asked. "Criminal charges are being filed," Foster replied. "Conspiracy, extortion, child endangerment, and several financial crimes that came to light during the investigation. He'll likely face significant prison time." After Foster left, Alexander and Luna sat in comfortable silence, watching the city below. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in golden light. "How do you feel?" Alexander asked finally. Luna considered the question seriously. "Tired. Relieved. Angry that it happened at all." She turned to face him. "But mostly grateful that you didn't give up on me. Luna, I need you to understand something. What Morrison threatened, the possibility of losing everything, that never mattered to me, not once. Because losing you would have been losing something irreplaceable." Tears threatened Luna's composure for the first time since the ordeal began. "I was so scared you'd decide I wasn't worth the trouble." Alexander knelt beside her chair so they were at eye level. "Listen to me carefully. You are not trouble to be managed or a problem to be solved. You are a remarkable young woman who has shown more strength and character than most adults I know. Nothing, not business deals, not public opinion, not corrupt men making threats, will ever change that." The final piece of legal paperwork arrived that afternoon. Alexander's guardianship application had been approved by the court, making their relationship official. Luna stared at the document that represented security, belonging, and the promise of a future. "Does this mean I can call you Dad now?" she asked quietly. Alexander felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Only if you want to. I'll never ask you to forget your mother or pretend I'm replacing her." Luna was quiet for a long moment. Maybe I could call you Dad sometimes, and you could call me your daughter. Not because we're replacing anyone, but because we're adding to our family." Alexander pulled her into a hug that conveyed everything words couldn't express. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, but inside that office, two people who had found each other against impossible odds were finally, officially, fam. Morrison's scheme had intended to destroy them. Instead, it had only made them stronger. 6 months later, Luna stood at the podium in St. Catherine's Academy's auditorium, looking out at an audience of classmates, teachers, and parents gathered for the annual Student Achievement Awards. Her academic performance had earned her the highest honors in her grade, but today, she was here for a different reason. "When I first came to this school," Luna began, her voice steady and clear, "I was afraid everyone would discover my secret, that I was different, that I didn't belong in your world. I thought my past would define my future." And in the audience, Alexander sat in the front row, his pride evident on his face. Beside him, Mrs. Chen dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, remembering the frightened child who had once cleaned offices to survive. "I want to tell you about the night that changed my life," Luna continued. I was working as a cleaner in an office building, trying to earn enough money to eat and find somewhere safe to sleep. I was 9 years old, and I believed I was completely alone in the world. A murmur rippled through the audience. Luna's story wasn't widely known at school, and the revelation shocked her classmates. But that night, I met someone who saw potential where others might have seen only problems. Someone who offered help without expecting anything in return, except that I work hard and stay true to myself. She looked directly at Alexander. My guardian taught me that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about people who choose to love and support each other, who stand together when the world tries to tear them apart. Luna's voice grew stronger as she continued. Some of you might think my story is unusual, and you're right. But every person in this room has faced challenges that tested their character. The question isn't whether we'll face adversity, it's how we'll respond when we do. She paused, thinking about Morrison, about the foster home, about all the moments when giving up would have been easier than fighting forward. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to do what's right even when you're terrified. It's standing up for truth even when lies would be easier. It's accepting help when you've learned not to trust anyone, and offering help when you've been hurt by others. The auditorium was completely silent now. Every person focused on Luna's words. To my classmates who come from families that have always been together, cherish that gift. To anyone who, like me, has had to build their family from scratch, know that love can happen in unexpected ways and at unexpected times. Luna's eyes found Sophia Wells in the audience, the girl who had been her first friend at St. Catherine's, and then Mrs. Patterson, who had supported her during the investigation. My mother died when I was 6, but she's still part of my family. My guardian isn't my biological father, but he's absolutely my dad. Mrs. Chen, who gave me my first job, is like a grandmother to me. Family is bigger and more flexible than we sometimes imagine. As Luna concluded her speech, the audience rose in sustained applause. She had shared her story not for sympathy, but to inspire others to look beyond conventional definitions of success and family. Later that evening, at their weekly dinner that had become a cherished tradition, Alexander raised his glass of sparkling cider in a toast. To Luna, he said, who taught me that the best investments aren't in companies or deals, but in people who have the courage to dream beyond their circumstances. Luna clinked her glass against his. To Dad, who taught me that home isn't a place. It's wherever people love you unconditionally. Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy, full of stories yet to be told. But inside that apartment, a father and daughter who had found each other against all odds were writing the next chapter of their unexpected, extraordinary family story.